What made you, who taught you how to be fearless?
It's a great question. It's why is Maureen fearless? I'm not. I'm not fearless. I'm scared of everything. The first couple years of the column, I would just go home and curl up in a ball on the floor of my house and cry. And I used to worry. Our office is directly across the park from the White House, and when it would get dark, I would think, oh God, you know, the Secret Service is going to come out and make a citizen's arrest, or something bad is going to happen. But I have to say, the benefit I had once this President Bush came in office was I come from an Irish working class family. My father was a detective who was in World War I. My mom was the most patriotic person I ever knew. She would honestly cry if I didn't wear red, white, and blue on, you know, July 4th. She would wear flag stockings, and you know, her pride in America was so palpable in the household. My brothers were in the Coast Guard. So I felt confident in my patriotism, and I felt confident. I feel that what I do for a living is really important because we are checks and balances. I don't know how to say this in a way that isn't corny, but that's why it's been such a remarkable period to go through, to see Dick Cheney and the president trying to curtail and destroy checks and balances. And so I never felt a lack of confidence in my patriotism. So when a lot of reporters were cowed by that, I can see how you're cowed by that, because it's like what I was just describing about testosterone. Like if they say that the Democrats are unmanly, that's like the worst thing the Democrats shrink from. That's why Hillary voted for the war authorization. I mean, they don't want to be called unmanly. And in the same way, you know, reporters don't want to be seen as not patriotic. Remember after 9/11 and NBC was turning the peacock into red, white, and blue? None of us want to be unpatriotic. But my family was so patriotic, I felt like it shielded me. I mean, I know what patriotism is, and patriotism is not taking away prisoners' rights and torturing them so that then, you know, a new John McCain can be tortured by the enemy. I mean, patriotism is not how they're defining it. So I just have to thank my family for that. We need a question.
I'm going to speak loudly if I don't offend anybody.
That gentleman there.
I want to ask about Condoleezza Rice. I know her history and dad and all that sort of stuff. I don't quite know how to put the question. I want you to say something about Condoleezza that I don't already know. Maybe can you recommend her for president and why?
The question is, can Maureen tell us something about Condi Rice that we don't already know, and whether she's up to being president? She just, by the way, I'll share this with you. She was at the UN last week in New York, and she came for about an hour talk at the New York Times. She was wearing a flame red suit and a little string of pearls, and she was tough as nails. The one I asked I waited till the end and asked her a question about whether she had any regrets about the way the Bush administration went for such a hard sell right before the war in Iraq with the WMD issue, whether in hindsight she had any regrets about that. And I was interested, she actually said she did have regrets about that. They were small ones, but it was the first time I'd ever seen her be anything less than completely certain and resolute in the rightness of the policy course that she and the president have set. And it just was interesting to me that there's a tiny little bit of daylight where she was confessing to something less than total infallibility. So tell us something we don't know about Condi.
Well, my feelings about Condi, I mean, she's an amazing character. I have very ambivalent feelings. I mean, I have to say, as a woman, I really admire her narrative arc. She's like a little girl in Birmingham. She becomes this Russian scholar and, you know, world-class pianist and ice skater, and she is incredibly articulate, and I think she dresses perfectly in a way that reflects well on the country. She deals with these Arab leaders who are racist and, you know, anti-female in an amazingly, you know, great way. But Condoleezza Rice, you know, pushed an immoral case for war, and her articulateness was used to bad purposes. She blew off her mentors, Brent Scowcroft and Colin Powell. She saw which way the wind was blowing and decided to cast her lot with Cheney and Rumsfeld and W. She didn't do her job as National Security Advisor because she was too busy being Bush's foreign policy nanny, trying to get him up to speed on what he should have known before he was elected president, and blew off. And in Woodward's book, it's confirmed again. She blew off all the warnings about terrorism because she was obsessed with missile defense, and she was busy trying to teach, you know, Bush things that he should have known. So, you know, I'm ambivalent. I mean, yes, she cuts a great kind of impressive figure as a woman, and she's a winner. She knew which side was the winning side, and yet, because of that lie at the start where they ginned up reasons, she tamped down all the reports she saw warning that things would not be good, and that, you know, the tubes were not being used for nuclear stuff, and help Bush play up the stuff that turned out to be exaggerated and not true, and our kids are dying now. They're just sitting ducks. So I can't admire, you know, what she did to get this country into war. So
Yeah.
I have a question about Laura Bush. I read something today about, going back to the Woodward book, that said that she recommended that the president fire Donald Rumsfeld. And I was kind of surprised by that. I want to know if you were surprised by that, and kind of what your take on Laura Bush.
The question is that in the Woodward book, he reports that there were two points where Andy Card pushed to get rid of Rumsfeld, and that in the second attempt he had the support of Laura Bush. In news articles today, she seemed to be denying that that was so, but it's often very difficult to ferret out exactly where Laura stands on several issues. And the question is, what's your take? How do you explain Laura's role in the White House? And do you think it's likely that she did push to get rid of Rumsfeld?
Well, in many ways, I kind of admire Laura Bush because I think, you know, comes across as a very classy woman, and she reads, and she's forcing Bush to read Camus and Shakespeare, which if he won't read histories of the Middle East and learn who the Shiites and Sunnis are, I think Shakespeare is your next best bet. But, you know, so I would tend to believe that she was smart enough. She's smart. I tend to believe that she was smart enough. Any woman who reads Russian literature knows a character like Rummy when she sees one. And I'm sure she felt like Nancy Reagan did about Don Regan, that this guy has an ego so big that he is willing to hurt, you know, the presidency just to make his point. I know, as anyone familiar with literature, she can see that, and I'm sure she did weigh in. But her husband, you know, said recently, I think, to some conservative columnists that he really admires Dick Cheney and Rummy's balls, and it comes back to this macho thing. He admires in them what everyone else thinks is just blowing up the world, this excessive sort of belligerence with no sense to it. And I'm not anti-war, you know, I was in favor of going into Afghanistan if we are after real enemies who have declared war on us, but that isn't what happened with Iraq. That was Dick Cheney thinking that if he kicks some Arab butt, they wouldn't look at us cross-eyed again. And every other reason for that war was pasted on afterwards.